sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning first. Thank you.
We are live.
All right. We are live and ready to roll. Okay. All right. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining us again on the update log. This is episode 5, where we're going to discuss UI and UX and its importance in video games. And for those of you who don't know, UI and UX just stands for user experience and user interface. Both of them, well, one UI kind of melds into UX or user experience pretty seamlessly. We're going to kind of discuss that whole rigmarole tonight. But before I continue on, again, want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on the update log. I'm your host, Rob. My co-hosts with me tonight are Greg and Matt, and we are 3 of the 4 members of the Vanguard Studios. With that said, how's everybody doing? How you guys doing?
Greg, you want to go first?
Would it be all right if I said anything other than I am fantastic?
Yeah, that was
It
fine.
would not be fine. Anything other than that. We are all great. Okay.
We're all great. We are all
Nothing
great.
bad ever happens to us.
well programmed and great. That's what we are. No, I'm good. It's been a beautiful day. It's nice to see that summer is finally here.
Mhm.
I love it. Wow, thank you very much, Armania.
Yeah, I'm now here gifting subs.
Strong start to the stream. Thank you very much.
That's me. I am fantastic as always. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well myself. Just spent a good bit of today just doing some additional research for what we plan to be talking about today. And for those of you worried, it sounds complicated, but we're going to do our best to break it down in a way that anyone can understand.
Yeah, we're gonna give you guys the kind of there will be some jargon, but we're gonna keep it in kind of layman's terms as best we can. What about you guys? What about the chat? How are you guys doing today? How's y'all's day been going? This is the portion of the stream where we kind of check in with everybody, make sure everybody's good, because you're important.
Doesn't look like anybody's too chatty this evening. So
no, I think everybody needs their bean juice, their coffee.
That's okay. We're gonna assume that everybody is fantastic.
Yep. I think that's one of Greg's favorite lines. Is fantastic.
It's my word for today. Fantastic. Everything is going to be fantastic, even if it's really not.
Okay. Well, let's kind of jump right into it then. Oh yeah, she did pester me. Grim Wolfen, welcome. Good. I'm glad you're doing fantastic as well, man. All right. So yeah, UI and UX and UI translated to user experience and user interface. Let's start with we'll start with user interfaces. It's something I think we all know what it is. It's basically the UI, the user interface, the HUD, your menus, your heads-up display that shows your health, your experience points, your ammo, what gun you have, what spells you have. Basically, it's the part of the display when you're playing a video game that gives you the data and the information that you need as the player to do whatever it is you're doing. Fight the boss, traverse the environment. It gives you all of your information readily available. Very, if it's done well, simply put, it leaves no room for confusion. Now, kind of the umbrella portion of this is the UX, the user experience, because within that UI there is an experience that you are going to get to have as the player. But the user experience doesn't just translate to the UI; it translates to the entire world. I'm actually going to ask our soon-to-be graduate of game design, Matt. Go ahead, fill the crowd in on what user experience is, and kind of how, more or less, keep it simple, how it's going to impact you as a player within the game that you're playing.
Yeah. So I think the simplest way to explain UX is it is how the system of the game communicates with you, the player, and how you, the player, can interact back with that system. And it's a very broad category that applies to almost every piece of making the game. This can go from like the UI as you're talking about that just has some basic information on your screen, how menus are presented, to all the way for like say level design and helping the person figure out where it goes next with the natural layout of the level.
Mhm.
It's it's everywhere really. And like another example is just like feedback on a certain mechanic. Like if you like just to put a simple example, if you were to attack an enemy, there are several pieces of feedback that are important to tell the player that you just attacked, which is like when you press the button, your character does an attack animation. And when it hits the enemy, there's some feedback like maybe they have a flinch or they flash red or whatever that tells you they got hit. That is all part of user experience because it tells you that it just happened. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, like you could have none of those things, but in the system in the background, you did the attack and the enemy's HP has been lowered.
Yeah.
But they have to tell you that it happened, whether the HP bar or just other types of feedbacks that let you know you attacked and you hit the guy. So,
Yeah.
and
It's
there's a lot of places that similar concepts are used.
Oh yeah, yeah. UX, user experience. It crosses a lot of disciplines within the industry. Level design, environmental design, layouts of particular biomes. Perfect example is that I know of off the top of my head is Gears of War. I believe it's all of them actually, but particularly I believe it's Gears of War 3. Anyone here has played Gears of War, the Gears of War franchise? If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It's really, really freaking good. Um, yeah, Elden Ring. Yep, is the game over? Yeah, over screen. Yep, yep. That is Elden Ring is definitely one of those that keeps a very, very simple UI, but the experience, the user's experience, is absolutely fantastic. Um, but Gears of War, one of the design philosophies that they took up with relation to the user experience was being that it's a cover-based game, every piece of cover, and it's usually big, chunky things, that was by design. So, derelict cars, chunky like roadblocks, pieces of stone, things like that. Anything that kind of had heft and weight to it was purposely put, in the environment to signify, hey, this is a piece of cover that you as a player can use. But what they did on top of that was they made every piece of cover the same size, same height, from cars to blocks. That way, at a glance, the player would know, hey, that's a piece of cover, that's a piece of cover. Wouldn't have to use a lot of brain power. And that's the thing with user experience and keeping it simple and doing it well. Because in the case of a video game, there's so much information coming back at us, so much information that we have to that our brains has to process through, and to make that easier, to make it smoother and basically seamless, UX designers think of those things like, hey, let's break this down to its barest point, and how do we make this seamless for the player to understand, obviously after learning what it is. There's always that tutorial piece where you go through your basic controls, and you learn what this is, what that is, what's that piece of cover, how to go to cover, all that, using Gears of War as an example, etc., etc. And then from there on, literally, it's like second nature. You see a piece of cover, you slide right into it. And that's one example of how UX designers really basically take the background, elements, the words escape me today, the game mechanical elements that you kind of only see in the background, only if you're really paying attention to them, and they mesh that with the world, so everything happens seamlessly, and it doesn't break that immersion.
So the UX piece, to put it in the simplest possible terms, the UX piece is really there to generate player agency. It's making sure that the game is something, what the player is able to do in the game actually is what they want to do in most cases. And there's some really, really fantastic examples of that, like Gears of War. And I think maybe we should talk a little bit about the open world concept piece, because that's where I think you see this most in the more expansive open world games, where you really get a lot of that player agency piece, because it's necessary to gain immersion in the game.
Yeah, having that. And actually, that is a good point, Greg, where open world really takes advantage of the user experience piece, because the UX team really has to, depending on the game, give you options that are kind of hidden in the world, but in such a way that you can find them. Obviously, perfect example, and we're probably going to use this one a lot. Any of the Souls games, they're littered with UX pieces within the world, and little bits of lore. That's all user experience. Well, how did you get to that bit of lore? Did you have to follow a trail? Did you have to solve a puzzle?
Who cares? Who cares about lore?
Lore. I care about lore. But hey, it's Insomnia Night. Welcome to the stream, man. And you're welcome for the shout out. And yeah, Grimwolfen. Gears of War was one of the first games that did the. So what Grimwolfen is talking about, for those of you who don't know or have never played, typically you'll see it oftentimes a lot of nowadays in first-person shooters. A lot. They're starting to show up in a lot of other games. I believe it's in some of the Souls games. But basically, whenever you take damage, that kind of like that red kind of pulsing edge you get to your screen. Yeah, the vignette at the edge of your screens. Gears of War was one of the first games, I think, if not the first game to do that. And again, that goes back to that's a mix of a UX element and a UI element, to indicate, hey, you're getting hit, you're getting taken damage, you need to go for cover. I'll get to another piece of that in a moment, but go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, and like I think the very core of UX is communication. So like that red vignette is how the game communicates to the player that, hey, you took some damage or you're getting low on health. That's how they communicate it to you. Because like in the system, your health is just like a number, say like 25 out of 100. But you don't see those numbers like say in Gears of War, you don't see like a health bar, but they use that vignette to communicate to you like, hey, you're in trouble right now. And this communication is present in like so many other aspects of the game design. Like I'll bring up Elden Ring for a second, and it's very the level design at the very beginning of the game. Because when you first start the game, you're on this little island, and you kind of walk out of this building, and you look off to your left to the mainland, and right there is a castle, and that is like your first big goalpost for the game, like
Mm.
your major goal that you work towards next, and you see it from right there. And that's part of the UX and the level design telling you that, like, hey, this is the next big thing you need to do. And they put it right in front of you from the very beginning, so that when you do enter that first area, Limgrave, and you find that place again, like, oh, this is the place I saw before. This is probably something.
Mm-hmm.
I think some design groups definitely do this better than others, because I agree with the sentiment that Grimwolfen was mentioning that he never did like the red vignettes because you couldn't see anything, and as annoying as Zelda. Hold on one second.
Now we know it's a legitimate stream, people.
Yes, we experienced our
So-
first drop. There we go. Now we're back.
Yeah. So with the red vignetting, like I know one game that I think overdid it a little bit was Fable 3. Because I remember that sometimes getting so bad when you're on low health that it made it very difficult to see what was even going on, combined with the generous use of a lot of camera blur when you turned your camera, or when anything moved, really.
Yeah.
So it's blurry and red, and it's like, what is going on? For Grimwolfen, don't get me started on Fable 3. They had an intense motion blur that you couldn't turn off. Yes. You could not turn it off, and it was intense. Ooh.
Yeah, I'm never a fan of motion blur at all. I always turn that off in any game I play. And like screen shake, just why? I hate it.
I think some level of screen shake is fine because it's another one of those pieces of feedback to the player that something is going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But of course, there are cases when it goes a little too far, and it's like things are shaking so much I can't even tell what's going on.
Yeah, like you can't function. Or in the case of those who get motion sick really easily, you get sick. Yeah, I don't mind the controller vibration, but I do always turn off screen shake Grimwolfen. So another element of
I got some things here. Oh, hold on just a moment.
Go ahead.
This UX piece, because I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this since we started this conversation, looking at the material that we were looking at. And I personally, I'm an open world gamer. I like to be able to absorb the environment of the game, and interact at my own discretion. Now, so at a certain point, the UX piece almost becomes a problem for someone like me, because I like to play and find out things for myself. I don't want to have, the game telling me every little thing. Okay, whether it's where to go next or how to get over this hill, or I don't want that. I want to play the game. I want to figure these things out for myself. The age of YouTube has kind of changed things a lot, because most time you have that potential to be able to just go, if you get stuck on something, just go look it up. But for me personally, I like to explore. I really like to kind of dive into the environment and look around, see what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't want to say that, like, I'm trying to think
Sounds
of
like
the
a
right way to
Souls game
word
player.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that in that case UX is a bad thing. It's just about how it's implemented. Because you could have a game like, say, I don't know, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, where you could be like 50 hours in and you'll still get like a tutorial message pop up teaching you how to do a certain thing. But there are plenty of games where they have other ways of teaching you how to play the game.
Right.
Like I've brought up before the indie game Tunic, in the way that the options are available, like the controls are available to you from the beginning to do a lot of things. It's just that you at first don't know that you're able to do it, in which there are two ways for you to figure out: through experimentation or later in the game when that information is revealed to you. And like I think no matter what, the game needs to be able to teach you how to play it somehow. It's just the difference in the way they do it, whether it's the tutorial message just flat out spelling it out for you, or by setting up an environment that allows you to experiment and figure it out for yourself.
Yep.
I think that's
Right.
one part of like how the recent Zelda games kind of handle themselves, that they are constantly giving you spots to experiment with things and figure out, okay, this is exactly how this works. And I believe that's the kind that you, Greg, like. You like getting those areas that just put some things in front of you. You know the basic functions, and it's like, hey, apply these basic functions to what you see in front of you, and discover how best to use it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And good evening, Moon Girl. Welcome to the stream. Thanks for joining us. But yeah, Greg. I mean, same boat. Like I like, give me the basics. Have a good, solid, tutorial area. Give me the basics on the elements that I need to know, and after that, just let me free. Just let me go do whatever it is I'm gonna do.
Right.
At my own pace. And I think a lot of games, especially purely and initially, like that's their whole premise, open world games. They're really about that. They don't do any hand holding. I mean, I can think of, so Conan Exiles is one. That's a kind of an open world survival base building game. V Rising is another one. All of like the survival, build, survive kind of games. Those are really, they kind of just, here's your backpack, good luck kind of deal. And I like that, honestly. But Elden Ring, all the Souls games are kind of similar vein. They'll give you a solid tutorial so you can get your footing, but after you leave that area, you're on your own.
Yeah.
7 days, yeah. Lost Ark, yep.
Yeah. Like in the Souls games, there are plenty of like basic controls that they will teach you. But one very important mechanic that they never outright spell out for you, but I think everyone intuitively learns, is part of the dodging, which is their invincibility frames.
Yeah,
And by that I
iframes, yep.
mean when you're dodging an attack, like you do your dodge roll and you essentially just kind of phase through the enemy's attack.
Mm-hmm.
It's at that point in your dodge roll that you have invincibility frames, meaning you cannot be hit. because if those weren't there, you'd be rolling, but you still technically get like
Take
just
damage.
slashed in the face. And I
Mhm.
think pretty much every player of the Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all of FromSoft's games intuitively learn about that mechanic as they play.
Yep.
Because that's essentially how you not die,
That's how you
unless you're going with the
survive.
shield build.
or you do ranged builds or magic builds and all that jazz.
Even then, you're gonna need to learn how to dodge, because there are some things where you just can't block.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, UX especially, and for me, here's the thing for me, UX is, I think it's an unsung hero in the gaming industry, primarily because everyone wants the cutting edge graphics or the new it thing, like, oh well, we're doing shooting differently, or we're doing this. Everybody wants that next element, within the gameplay loop to be something spicy and all that jazz. But I think UX is really an unsung hero because it takes all of the data, it takes all of the design philosophies, the technical shit, to put it simply, the technical shit, and it translates it to where the player can understand it and step into that world more fully and immersively, you know. And in that, kind of in that loop, or in that kind of vein of thought, excuse me, I want to turn it kind of over to the audience, and now that you guys kind of have a better understanding of UX and UI, are there any games that you guys have played lately, or in the past, that you kind of can think back to where a particular UI element has disappointed you, has kind of wowed you? Like, how did you feel about it? I know Grimwolf, and you've mentioned the red vignettes from Gears of War that they still have. There's actually an element to that I'll get to in a moment.
Yeah, it's like one example is like, I don't know, are there games that you might have played where like you felt that the game did not properly communicate something to you that was vital? Like maybe, I don't know, you didn't know that you were doing something and it was having some other effect because it just failed to really properly communicate to you that it was even happening. Or if you were expected like to know how to do something already, but the game never properly taught you how to do it.
I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot
It's
of
a lot of
games.
games.
Right. Yeah.
They're guilty of that
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah, I mean, as time goes on, games get more complicated in a lot of the
Mhm.
mechanics they put out. So teaching the players how to do a lot of these mechanics gets a bit more complicated. Part of why you see so many like tutorials in games these days compared to say like 20 years ago or more.
There's an aspect in one game that it hasn't been brought up yet. I don't know, maybe some folks have actually played this game, but the Left 4 Dead series.
Oh yeah.
There's quite a bit of. I mean, there's quite a bit of that going on in there, that player intuitiveness and really kind of walking you through, but at the same time allowing you some freedom to explore.
Yeah. And another element of UX is not just how the game communicates with you, but how you can communicate back to the game, which
Mm.
is by mainly controls. The controls of the game are also part of the user experience. So a game that may fail at that part may have very awkward controls.
But
Or awkward UI.
Grim
Oof.
Wolfen makes a really good point with what he's saying there, and that is the more realistic games seem to want to get rid of as much UI as possible for some reason. I can agree with that, absolutely.
Yeah, I can see the reason why, because like having too much like clutter on your screen can kind of take you out of the immersion factor. it just, I guess the balance lies in trying not to clutter your screen, but finding other ways to communicate that info that the player needs to know.
The tower.
Which I guess is like one thing that the red vignetting can do, because it doesn't put a health bar on your screen, but when you're low on health, the red vignetting shows up. But again, there are many different ways to do this.
Well, there's the the symbolism approach. We talked about this a little bit earlier. The symbolism approach for like the square representing something solid, something safe. Circle representing something that's kind of safe.
More the friendly side is kind of like what circles represent.
And then sharp, pointed edges, things like that being, because your mind automatically identifies those three things, especially with the sharp pointy edges piece to it, or like a star shaped or something like that. Your mind's going to go to, okay, that's a spot where there's enemies or something bad there,
MMOs from Grimwolf and MMOs taught me that circles are a source of a lot of damage.
It's so true. And there you go. That's user experience. That's the user experience. Another bit of UX is the rule of thirds. I don't know if you guys ever heard that, but basically, and if I'm remembering the principle correct, it's the most important things will happen on a third of the screen, and it could be any third. It could be the bottom third, the left third, and oftentimes when you have multiple elements, if you look at they do, from what I've heard. They really, really do the rule of thirds. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Greg. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna that right where you're at right now also brings in that that perception piece with the rule of thirds, where part of the vignetting piece is to identify, to allow you to be able to differentiate mobs and different creatures on your screen, because unless you're in an area, like a lot of boss fights are depicted as the one big bad, but not all of them. And generally the level progression thing means that you're going to end up at some point where your boss fights are not going to be just one boss. There's going to be multiple things going on, not like multiple bosses, although that's possible too, but you're going to have a lot of ads. And that vignetting piece allows you to easily differentiate, where the danger is actually at. One of the examples that was given was really, you're coming into a scene and you have two groups of people. Let's say there's 3 to 5 people in each group. You have two groups of people. If you identify one of them as being bad, mentally you're going to identify both of them as being bad. You're not necessarily going to differentiate that thing. And if you're focused and in the game, that's the easy thing for your mind to do. Is if I look to the right and I see, okay, I know that's a bad guy. I know those creatures are going to try and kill me. So my immediate assumption is all the creatures are going to try and kill me. And then being able to differentiate which ones of those are not necessarily, they're a threat, they're all threat, but which ones are a threat and then which one is really a threat. And that's what that piece comes in to identifying the difference. Like for your boss, generally your boss characters are always bigger in some way, or they have the big weapon, or they have, what I mean? There's some distinction there that that carries through a game that tells you, okay, this is the bad dude. One of the games we were talking about earlier, the big bosses generally are by themselves and mopey, I would say. That's the way they look to me anyway.
And did you say mopey?
Mopey, yeah. That's the way they usually look. They're usually just kind of wandering back and forth with the massive weapon, and you're you're 2 feet tall and they're 20 feet tall, and
That is true. They are kind of lonely. I think that's probably why they're always also angry, because they have no friends.
They have to ruminate on their dark designs.
Yes, their plans to rule the world.
Their plan to hit you with this really, really big stick they found that's about 5 times your body size.
Yeah, there's another one right there, Grimwolfen. Is usually it's usually your first indicator in most games is when the health bars start showing up, or when the that one particular music starts to play. Okay, yeah.
Boss
Yeah.
music.
I
Why
haven't
is
seen
Doom
them yet,
music?
but
Why
I'm
is
sure
Doom
they're
boss
here.
music playing right now? Hold on.
Yeah, like it's like you're playing Skyrim, you're just walking around, then you hear the bow music on. That's like, huh? What? Where?
So, yeah.
Who sees me?
Yep. Wait a minute. I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah, or the Dark Souls meme is like, why do I hear boss music all of a sudden?
Yep,
Like,
pretty much.
moments before just getting absolutely destroyed.
Singling out specifics that has a negative connotations and showing its own villain semiotics. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
like essentially, like there's a lot of tactics that are used to prove that like this guy is bad or this guy is dangerous. Like we touched a bit before on just shapes in generals. As Grimwolfen says, pointy characters
Pointy
are
character's bad. Yeah, pretty much.
because triangles or things with edges are generally associated with danger, evil, and stuff like that. That's why if you like look through a lot of like even like children's films, like old
Mo-
Disney films or video games, like evil people are usually have a good bit of pointy bits to their design, whether it could be like spikes on their armor or just their face shape is very pointed. It
Mhm.
tells you like this is dangerous, this is aggressive.
I really appreciate you using Mopey, by the way. That is awesome.
I mean, they are. They kind of are. Let's be honest. They're a little depresso.
Colors? Yes.
Yeah, for Moon Girl, colors are also very important.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
our color theory, it's colors represent things to people in certain cultures. So,
Mhm.
like, typically when we see black and red, as Moon Girl says, that usually tells us death, blood, not good stuff. The color theory is actually an interesting one that localizers for games actually have to change a lot between cultures because
Yeah, because the color palette won't translate.
yeah, because different cultures will see colors meaning different things. Where like white could in one culture represent something divine, in another culture it could represent something that just represents nothingness or death, stuff
Mhm.
like that. So localizers will often have to change certain colors in a game before shipping it out to different countries and stuff.
I'm gonna butcher the name. I am sure of that, but Desalin. I'll stop right there before I go on to do it any worse. But that's bringing up a really, really good point there with that the collective understanding or collective consciousness piece. Alyssa, good to see you. But yeah, the collective consciousness piece really does play a huge role in that piece, the color piece to it, and what we, what is the cognitive bias? And sorry to use that term, but what is the cognitive bias that when you approach the game? And depending upon where you're from or what group it is, you're going to have a different view on it. So,
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and and that all ties into UX design because they use those colors and those shapes to communicate to the player what they need to know about what they're seeing in front of them. From Grimwolf, and green can mean nature, or green is toxic. Yeah, those are like two very common uses of green. Because green, obviously, there's the tie into nature, because grass is green, trees have green leaves. Like, green is everywhere in nature. But poison is often also green. Or purple. Usually one of those two.
Yeah. It's
But
usually purple or green.
I've rarely seen like a, I don't know, pink poison or a yellow poison. It's almost always one of those two colors, green or purple.
Left 4 Dead, man. Spitters. It's green. Green goo.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Green ass. Yeah. And that's one of the powers of using color to communicate with your player what this thing means.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, I think you guys have a great understanding of UX. At least in my book.
I still debate on how much I actually now, the video game design piece of it not necessarily being, my wheelhouse in any of it, but I try to relate it to like the TTRPG world, and what would that, sorry, taking the conversation in that direction, but I mean, what would that actually be in the TTRPG world? How would you look at it from that standpoint?
That is how it. That's. I mean, outside of like how you design the source books.
I would say one part is the layout of the character
If it's red,
sheet.
you're dead. Yes.
Yeah.
Because the way the character sheet is, the whole layout is designed to where, like, usually you have like your health is kind of on the upper side of the sheet. It's easy to notice. So, which is, your health is something that you naturally do need to pay a lot of attention to. So it's very easy to find. That's part of the UX. They've designed it so it's easy to know that information, as well as your like ability scores. Your strength, intelligence, dexterity, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Usually one of the bigger numbers that are on your sheet and very easy to find. I would say that's part of the UX for tabletop games. And again, the UX is a very broad subject, because it can go even from the fact, like, rolling dice is how you communicate back with the game.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and that's, I brought that question up because it's something that's pertinent for us, but the UX piece, it could have a lot to do with mechanics. Absolutely. My personal opinion is it has a lot more to do with story and lore, though. Because from the TTRPG standpoint, I mean, that's really where the experience that you're creating has to start from somewhere. And that's for everybody. It's not just for the developers, the writers themselves. It's for the players as well. I mean, your experience has to start somewhere. You have to, get an idea of, okay, what is this about? What is this world about? What are the people in this world about? And then you go into the creation process of, okay, now what do I want to, what story do I want to tell? That's where that UX question, I think, becomes very relevant, depending upon how you structure the lore involved with the game, and make sure that it's consistent, so that it makes sense in the world. Or if there's divisions in the world, if you have a large and expanded world that you're going into, that each division has, or culture within the world has, its own specific and very clear way of handling and looking at things. And maybe even going so far as to try to give a basic idea of how those cultures would interact, so that, players would have an idea there as well. is, you know, if I'm running my players from XYZ and XYZ has had a long bad history with ABC, then I know that if I'm dealing with somebody from ABC, yeah, we're probably not going to be friends right away, you know, if ever.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, and like I've said before, the core of all of UX design is communication between the game and the player, and and it's a two-way road.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause the game needs to tell you the information of how it works and all the systems and stuff, and player needs to communicate back to the game via the controls.
Yeah. And not only does the player need to communicate back to the game, like ideally if you're doing it right, the player wants to.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Like the
they
player
know
wants to.
exactly how to communicate back with the game, and it's engaging too. Like one game that I actually want to bring up where that I think really failed in this respect in their control scheme. So there was a game for the 3DS, and I actually have it right here to use to try to show as an example of how awkward as hell this game's control scheme was. There's a game called Kid Icarus Uprising for the 3DS. And personally, I loved the game. It had really good writing. Interesting fun fact is actually had the same writers as Happy Tree Friends, if any of you guys know what that is. So yeah, they had some pretty funny writing in there. And the game
Happy
system
Tree
was
Friends.
yeah,
Happy
if you
Tree
don't know
Friends, that's the name of it?
yeah, if you don't know,
Oh
it's
my god.
best way to describe what that is. Essentially, imagine if Hello Kitty got its face torn off in the most violent possible way.
I
Wow.
try not
And-
to imagine Hello Kitty, by the way.
Yeah, for
but
real.
yeah, that's essentially what Happy Tree Friends is. But anyway, back to Kid Icarus Uprising. Its mechanics were a lot of fun. Like you had it was fast paced. Its action was fast paced. It had a pretty in-depth weapon system with several different classes of weapons, and then different weapons within those classes that all act differently, and you could fuse weapons to add certain traits together.
Mhm.
So like no two weapons would be the same essentially, even if they were the same subclass of weapon.
Hmm.
So the game had a lot going for it. It was fun to play. It had good writing and story.
Mhm.
The only thing, and I think this is the thing that killed the game entirely, is that it was awkward as hell to control. So I'm going to try my best to show you guys how this game was played.
Got a visual aid, ladies and gentlemen.
So you got to have your left hand on the 3DS so you can reach this circle pad, the D-pad, and the L button.
Hey, hold,
And on your right hand, you
give
have
me-
the stylus to
give me
aim.
give me just
your
a second,
reticle to shoot.
Matt. I am going to increase the size so people can see you a little more clearly.
Oh right, okay.
So that we
We're gonna
can
put you front and center, my man.
You bet. You did it now.
No, okay. I mean, people need to see why this game
There you
puts
go,
so many
brother.
people off.
Show
Okay.
us.
Okay, so essentially, you are holding the game in their entire 3DS in one hand, and still doing things with this one hand with your thumb. Then with the other hand, you're trying to aim. And this naturally gave a lot of people like hand cramps with their left hand, because they're trying to support the entire 3DS while doing other things. And the only reason I managed to make it through with this is because I started holding it in a way to where I could support it with my right hand and still be able to move the stylus around. If that sounds awkward as hell, you are correct, and that is why that game never got any more popular than it did.
I don't understand. I don't get it. Why? Just why? Why? And here's the thing: it's not just about that particular one, but for those studios that try to add in a new element, and they just go with some off the wall. Like In what universe did the developer? I want to know what developer sat there and did that and held it and did the stylus thing and thought that was comfortable. I want to meet them.
Yeah, well, I guess like the thing that I think of is like I don't know how else they would have done it because the 3DS in general is not a system that is well designed for shooters, like at all. So I honestly don't know how else they would have implemented the controls for that game while keeping everything that it had in it. And
Grim Wolfen said carpal tunnel simulator.
yes, it definitely was. I built some like I had to like build up like
I-
hand muscles to
I-
be able to play the game for a long period of time without like getting cramps or and
I,
stuff.
I think Grimwolfen's being nice because my mind went somewhere entirely different with that whole thing. So,
Jesus.
yeah. So
especially when you ask the question of what person would want to do that and think it's not a problem, I'm like,
mean,
somebody
yeah, I
who's
guess.
had a lot of practice with that hand, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
anyway.
probably.
changing subject to not what you guys are implying. Moon Girl says brings up a Skyward Sword and the way they really leaned into the Wii remote and
Mhm.
how that was awful. And for those who don't aren't familiar with Zelda Skyward Sword, is that it's pretty much I believe it's the main Zelda title before Breath of the Wild where they really switched things up. And so what they did is to swing the sword, you had the Wiimote in your hand and you would actually swing the Wiimote itself. Now that sounds kind of cool, but what it kind of devolves to is you just kind of like to attack. When you want to attack, you have your Wiimote, then you just go, just like kind of wildly
Oh my
swinging.
god.
And it looks goofy. And overall, I don't, and I think a lot of people would agree that it wasn't as fun as the previous way of attacking. Oh yeah, and the Wii could not always track the movements well. I agree. Like sometimes, and like one of the big things was eventually enemies would block, like try to parry your strikes, and it would depend on the direction. So like they'd be holding their weapon horizontally, so you don't want to attack vertically where it could easily block that. You want to attack in the right direction so you could get past their attempted block. But sometimes the Wii wouldn't always track that right, and so you try to attack one way, but then Link ends up attacking another way, and then boom, your attack is blocked, and then they get like a counterattack in and hit you. It wasn't great.
We had how many times can you say we in a sentence with this? But we had a Wii for we bought ours when it first came out, and I think we used it like twice, and it basically sat for 3 years, 3 years or so, and finally one day it's like, oh hey, what's this thing? Oh, that's the Wii, and I think we just gave it to somebody. It's just like, here, this is never going to get used.
Yeah, like there was a reason that Nintendo has kind of slowly shifted out of the motion controls. Given I think out of the other consoles, they did it the best. But they kind of slowly shifted out of it. And they're kind of back to the standard, you have a normal controller and you're pressing buttons and that's all you need. Like, hell, even, Metroid Prime 3, that actually was pretty well implemented where you kind of use the Wiimote to aim to shoot Samus's arm cannon. That was actually well implemented. I think I managed to have fun with that, but for the most part, motion controls fell out of popularity. Like, if I remember right, it was the PS3 actually had some motion control in its controller, in the way that you tilted the controller. Like I'll use, even though this is a Xbox controller, kind of use it as reference to where like you could tilt it down, tilt it up, or to the sides. And a lot of the launch titles for the PS3 had games that included mechanics that relied on those kinds of controls. That did not last very long because no one liked it.
the only game on the Wii but I didn't play a lot of games on the Wii, but the only one that I could say I actually enjoyed in the couple of times that I played it, I think it was called Hot Shots Golf or something like that. It was horrible.
You would like golf.
It was horrible. It was horrible to play, but just because it was so horrible to play, it was actually fun because Anyway, why would I like
it was
golf?
one of those that was terrible enough that it was kind of like a train wreck. You just had to watch it.
It took like 5 swings to figure out how to actually hit the ball and that type of stuff. I had a lot of fun with that. I think we played it one time. I think my wife and I played it with the kids like one time, and we had a lot of fun swinging that thing around, trying to hit the ball and whatever, keep the ball on the green. I don't really know golf, so, but
yeah, and
that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Another example of bad controls that I can think of is how FromSoft, like the Dark Souls series, used to do jumping before Elden Ring. Right now, jumping in Elden Ring, simple. You press like the A button on like a Xbox controller and you jump. Simple, clean. It was not always this way. I think it was in the original Dark Souls where you would have to be sprinting using the B button. Again, using a Xbox controller as an example. And then while sprinting, you would have to click in the left analog stick. And that was how you jumped.
Huh.
A little weird, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that is.
And then later, I don't remember at which, if it was Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3, they changed it again. So again, you still had to be sprinting, holding B. And then this time, you would have to like quickly kind of double tap B while sprinting, and then that would jump.
Do you remember the very first Nintendo controllers, the little box thing with the cross deal and
yeah, the those classic things.
Those classic things. Version 2 was they had buttons on the top too, so you had the 2 with your thumbs and the buttons on top. Anyway, somebody remembers. See, I remember playing. I don't know if any of you guys. I remember playing my Nintendo, and is around the time that Top Gun the movie came out, the first one. And I remember playing that game and trying to land an aircraft on a carrier with that little control in the game, obviously, but trying to land the aircraft on a carrier with that little controller. And oh my God, that was challenging.
Yeah, I remember the Nintendo. I had the first NES when I was 4 years old. Remember my mom got it for me. And I played Mario Brothers all night long. It was great.
I agree, Grim.
Yeah, Grimwolfen brings up the Nintendo 64 controller. Now that was
was weird.
Yeah,
that was something else.
It's like
man.
made for someone with 3 hands. Like, if there was anything, like, say human civilization ends and aliens find us, if they see anything to try to insert biology by, I want them to find that controller.
A Nintendo 64
be
controller.
Like, I see, they must have had 3 hands to use this controller with. What a strange species.
3 hands. Oh man!
It's very shaped.
Now I'm like imagining people having like a hand like right above their belly button, because that's where the controller sits, right? It kind of sits near your lap, so
yeah. And yeah, so it's like that's all part of the UX design. The controls, how the player communicates back with the game, and
I want to know. I want to know who designed the fucking 64 controller, and what were they on?
It would be very interesting. I feel like I need to research this now. The philosophy that went into the design of that controller, because it's odd. It's very odd.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you think about controllers pre that, they were all literally a joystick. I mean, if you think about like Atari, Odyssey, those systems,
Mhm.
which would have been the predating systems to like your Sega and your Nintendo. They were all just a little joystick with a button for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah. Like,
and it's
God, man, nostalgia for sure.
yeah, but like the common thread that you always see in controllers is that they're designed for two hands.
yeah.
There's a place to put your left hand and a place to put your right hand. Whether it's like the joystick where you have one hand on the joystick and then the other hand pressing the buttons, or the modern day controllers where, it's obvious where your hands fit onto the thing. The Nintendo 64 controller had like, imagine this shape, but then there's another piece coming down right in the middle,
Right.
like a third handle. And it's like, huh? How? What do I do? Do I hold that handle? What's going on? So it just like breaks the conventions of how like every controller has pretty much ever been.
Ever been? Yeah. I mean, and honestly, that probably was why they did it. They're like, this is something new and it's gonna catch on. I promise. Watch.
I will hand it to Nintendo. If anything, they're always trying to do something different than the competitors.
They really
Like-
are.
Like
They
Sony
really
and
fucking are.
Microsoft, they're a lot more similar to each other than they are to Nintendo.
Hmm.
I think it's one of Nintendo's greatest strengths, sometimes a weakness. Like,
Well, innovation's good though. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just when you're the leader in innovation, you better be really, really good at it, because
Mhm.
you're basically just paving the way for somebody else to come
Someone
along
else.
and do it better than you do.
Yep.
And that's okay. I mean, we need innovators. We need companies to be innovative. We need them to be developing new things and challenging the current theory or status quo continuously, because that's how stuff continues to get better for the consumer.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
like change is necessary so things don't get boring, especially in the gaming space. And I suppose this is a little off topic from the UX bit, but it's very important because like, and we'll bring up Zelda for example. Breath of the Wild shook up the entire formula that the Legend of Zelda series had been using until that point, and it has done amazingly. So that was
True.
a good example of some innovation there. Grimwolfen actually brings up a bad example of innovation. They had very long time ago the Nintendo VR headset. Oh god,
Mhm.
what was
Oh,
that
God.
called?
I don't remember.
I gotta look
Um,
that up.
Yeah.
I think I know the one you're talking about. I can't remember the name of
I
it.
remember the glove for sure. I've got the visual of that. I remember that.
I think it was called the Virtual Boy.
I think that might have been it. Like, I know what you're
Yes.
talking
Okay.
about.
Yes, it was the Virtual Boy. And for anyone who isn't familiar, like how now gaming and VR is starting to become a thing because the technology is there. This thing came out in 1995,
Oh,
trying to put something on your face so you can get that kind of like first person view.
Ah, the good old
Um,
days. Mhm.
Yeah, suffice to say, technology wasn't quite there yet, and
nope.
it just didn't look good. It failed really bad.
Yeah, the glove looked cool. That's about it.
Oh,
And
the Power Glove.
well, and I remember those. I think they actually did a recall on those, because I think so. I think they did, because from what I remember of them is they didn't work very long, like literally work, where they couldn't withstand the use.
Oh,
So
see, the Power Glove is such a tragic thing because to me, that's like it's the coolest idea that just doesn't work.
Nope. Nope. It's I mean, now maybe we'll get a Power Glove version 2.
You know what? If someone manages to make it, take my money, please.
Jeez. I mean, hey, yeah. Most
Most
controllers these days don't last long. That's true.
Yeah, the Switch's dreaded Joy-Con drift. That has been a problem that has plagued the Switch for its entire lifetime.
That's why PC Master Race. I said what I said.
Right. I'm a PC guy too. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like as Grim Wolfen says, like I think even other console controllers aren't quite as durable as they used to be. I think they focus a lot on trying to make them cheaply these days, and so they tend to eventually kind of either die out or get some sort of weird
issue,
like a control stick going awry and having weird inputs, or a button just kind of going slack. It's I feel like that's common these days. Meanwhile, like say the good old Nintendo 64 controller
still works.
I don't remember that thing ever breaking.
Nope. And well, here's the thing, because obviously, they got to sell them things. The only time I think the only ones that really don't just die on you are the ones that are like $150. They're like the elite controllers or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, standard stuff, it's cheap.
For Grimwolf, they don't survive a frustrate throw at a wall like they used to.
I mean, that's true. They're no Nokia. Like, honestly, if Nokia started making controllers, them things would last forever.
Yeah, it's like back in the day when I threw my controller at a wall, the controller won, and that wall had a hole in it. Nowadays, the wall wins and my controller breaks. I mean, come on.
I mean, it's true though. It really is true.
What? There's a strategy in that. You develop games that piss people off, and then make cheap controllers so they have to keep buying them.
Greg, don't give them any more ideas, all right?
Because
they're probably
Dark Souls
watching.
Makes sense.
Yeah, right. From Software has stock in the controller market.
Yeah. So, since we're on the topic of bad company decisions,
oof, oh boy.
Because I mean, there's been a lot of them, especially when it comes to the mechanics and things like that. But I think, the industry has changed so much in such a short period of time. As you think over the last, 20 to 30 years is what we've kind of covered tonight with that time wise, all the way going back to like your Atari Odyssey into Nintendo, and that gaming system really kind of propelled things, that first Nintendo system. But then you look at, as we come forward to where we're at now, not necessarily with the gaming systems, but with the programs, the product. At this point, the digital product has really become the industry. And some of the big names in that digital product are companies like Blizzard, and there's a bunch of them which they're not coming to mind right now.
Activision,
Ubisoft,
yeah,
and look at some of the other things that have, even Bethesda in that group, and some of the plans that came out there that fell through. The CD Projekt Red with their the original intention behind the Cyberpunk game was to make that an MMO style game, or have the potential to make it an MMO style game. That obviously fell off really quickly with rough launch to the base game and whatnot. And I just want to mention this really quickly about what we were talking about before. I love the CD Projekt Red, the Cyberpunk 2077. I am absolutely. I love the game, but when it comes to the UX UI piece, I do think they failed there. because there's that. It's just way too easy to run through the core story of the game, and it's there. You don't really have any of those directional markers. There's nothing pushing you in a direction where you're actually going to experience the environment, except for by following the storyline. And then a lot of that is to deal with cutscenes and stuff like that give you a certain type of immersion. But when it comes to the open world concept and actually being able to explore that world, yeah, it's beautiful. And, the sound effects, the music, all that stuff do create a certain ambiance for you. But I think they fail in that area. But back on what I was saying about the MMO piece to it. Matt brought up a point in our conversations yesterday, before the stream, talking about what our friends over at Blizzard have been doing. And you guys know this better than I do, so I'm going to shut up and let's get that out there and talk about it a little bit.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, here's a segment. What did Blizzard do this time? 'Cause,
What didn't they do? That's a better question.
Because in the past several years, they've been under hot water for a lot of things that we could spend a long time talking about. But this time, talking specifically about the recent development with Overwatch 2. So, one of the criticisms a lot of people had for Overwatch 2 is that it doesn't quite earn its status as a sequel. It feels more just like an Overwatch 1.5. One of the big things that the developers kept saying that would earn it its status as a sequel was a PvE mode. Because Overwatch, for those who don't know, it's a PvP based game where players have two teams of several heroes that they can pick from, and they'll fight over a certain objective. It was always PvP based. And so everyone was really excited for this PvE mode that was going to be coming out with Overwatch 2. Well, Overwatch 2 comes out, and they say, "Oh, it's a lot of work. We're gonna delay it, but it's still coming, folks. Don't you worry." And then I think it was about 2 weeks ago that they officially announced, "Yeah, it's not happening no more, folks."
Grim Wolf in a glorified shop. I mean, that's what it's sounding like.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened, because they changed their monetization strategy from before. Overwatch 1 was a game that you would buy for like $60, and it had the loot boxes, which people complained about the loot boxes. There's a whole controversy whether people consider it gambling or not. So they're like, okay, we'll do away with that. They made Overwatch 2 a free-to-play game, but with a battle pass system, which many people argue is even worse. And so, without now the promised PvE situation content, now it's like that's all Overwatch 2 is, a new way to monetize the game. And the thing that stings the most about this cancellation of the PvE, or I shouldn't say cancellation, because they're scaling it back to where the original intent was a long campaign where heroes would have their own progression and talent trees, which that's no longer happening. Now they're gonna sprinkle in smaller PvE situations, but there's no longer going to be any character progression or talent trees. So obviously people aren't happy about that. But the sting is that, according to some interviews and what some of the Overwatch team has said, is that they knew from launch that this was going to happen from the moment Overwatch 2 launched. And they chose never to reveal it to the public until now. They told people, hey, PvE's coming, guys. Come on, play Overwatch 2. When they already knew that It wasn't coming. And so that got a lot of people pissed.
Jesus.
Because, like, okay, there was scope creep. It was extremely ambitious project. It's like, I can understand why they had to scale it back to the way they did. So, like, poorly managed? Probably. Yes. But that happens. The main breach of trust is that they kind of broke their promise to deliver on this thing and didn't even tell us until now.
Yep.
While parents trying to sell us on the idea of it this whole time. So yeah, it's another common Blizzard L.
I mean, the whole company's a L at this point.
Yeah, it's becoming very difficult to ever trust pretty much anything Blizzard comes out with these days.
Yeah.
Heavily,
The whole company's a L.
heavily commercialized, very, very heavily monetized.
Yeah, like anyone who plays Overwatch 2 can attest to how overpriced. Like, you can, like, there are some skins for a hero that cost $20. And okay, I actually gotta look this up because there's always one excuse for these kind of monetization things. It's like, oh well, there's always a free way to get it if you just play the game enough. And I gotta look up this stat. Overwatch 2. How long to? So someone broke down how long it would take to complete or to unlock a lot of things in Overwatch 2 using the free method instead of paying, for like the special battle pass and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't find it. If I remember, it was essentially you need to spend almost your entire lifetime playing the game to unlock these things for free. It was like, I almost want to say, God, I wish I could find this up. It was essentially years in order to get this stuff for free instead of paying for it. And that's how frustrating they made it to try to make you pay for it.
Yeah, I mean the whole mobile fiasco that they did, Diablo Immortal or whatever the fuck it was called.
Yeah, Diablo
Immortal. Where you had to literally pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to level your character. And granted, there were people that did this shit.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing this is why Blizzard, Activision does this shit, and companies like do this shit, because you got people out there with just money to burn. Like, I'm gonna spend $100,000 on a fucking pixels.
Oh, I found it. I found it. How long in Overwatch 2? Because you get like free coins for completing weekly challenges. But with how expensive things are and how much like some things cost, according to this person, it will take you 327 years.
300? Wait, what the?
That's all.
3.
If you were to not pay a single cent to Overwatch 2 and resolve yourself to unlocking everything for free, it would take you several lifetimes in order to do it. And this is an estimation from late 2022, which as they add more stuff to the game, that number is just going to go up, man.
Well, that's the problems there are, one is there are people that are willing to pay it.
Yeah,
that's. I'm not gonna say I've never bought in-game content because we all know that's a lie. But people do buy in-game content to ideally to enhance their experience. But then you have those that drive or need to want to have the best or the greatest or something shocking or something, fresh and new for whatever. And that drives the monetization piece, is just the fact that we're willing to spend the money to do it.
Yeah. Grimwolf in Or go ahead, Greg.
Well, on the reverse side of that, really quickly, they, these companies have to continue to develop and put out product and expand upon their games, and they gotta be making money to do that. And that's I would say that's the argument side to it. IP is such an interesting thing because anything that is in that realm of intellectual property is for the most part a once and done type of deal. Now, obviously, with the large scale games, MMO games, I mean, you got to have support staff there to keep things functioning correctly, and you do have the servers running and those things. So there's some continuous investment in that, but it really comes down to where does all that money go? Honestly, where does all that money go? Because that they are making, I mean, especially from the standpoint of, once you've created once you have the game to the release date, and we know this from looking at the industry itself, and especially right now, the market is definitely bearing this out. And once you get the game to release date, I mean, you're essentially trimming half to 3/4 of your staff because all those people you needed to build that game, you don't need them anymore. And that's, I'm not saying that's good at all. I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm just stating the fact. That's what happens. And especially in the marketplace right now, where all these companies, maybe not all, but a lot of them are doing this. Blizzard's no exception in that, where they're, a lot of the other companies are also trimming back, not just features that they've talked about adding into games, but projects that they've been working on for a while, new game concepts, where they're suddenly saying, yeah, we're gonna hold off on that. Mm-hmm. And that's the question in my mind is, where's all this money?
Where's your money going?
Right. I mean, you come back and say you're dealing in intellectual property, man. Come on. You've been making money hand over fist with most of the projects that you've put out there. You've basically brought on staff, and I mean, there's a lot of investment up front, probably a lot of debt up front, but you've brought on the staff to develop and produce and get this product to market. And then once it's to market, all those people are independent contractors, and they're, adios.
Boot 'em.
Yeah, thanks.
Project is done.
Yeah. So you've had this, in some cases, these games are long running games. I mean, look at what World of Warcraft, perfect example. I mean, there's
2020 actually, it'll be 20 years.
Yeah. And at this point, that
26,
that game
2026, yeah,
is probably on par for being worth as much as like the top producing diamond mine ever, because it's all profit. You know what I mean? There's no debt involved with that anymore. It's all profit. They're just maintaining the game and adding little features here and there to keep people, to keep people somewhat interested in playing on their platform.
Oh yeah, Grim Wolfen brought up a good point. He's like, let's look up how much money the CEO of Activision Blizzard makes. I mean, there have been stories of guys, developers who making, here's the thing: being a game developer or designer or whatever, you make some decent money. You do make some decent money, especially if you're at a larger studio. But there have been documented instances where developers have heard like mid-level and upper-level CEOs talking about making $34 million.
Yeah, speaking of the CEO of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick is his name, and he is considered by many among one of America's most overpaid CEOs.
Yeah, he is.
Because he lines his pockets well for how much comparatively for how much
everybody else.
Yeah, he gives himself hefty, and I mean hefty, bonuses every year. So much that even the board of directors have each year, the opposition to granting that bonus is actually growing each year, because they're kind of getting tired of how much he's given himself.
They're like, you need to calm down, bud. You need to calm down.
Yeah,
You need to,
the
you need
company
to
is like,
relax.
it's in shambles. Everything's on fire. Public PR is in the shitter.
And you
you
out
need
here
another
giving
$34
yourself
million. You don't know the pressure, man. You don't know the pressure of getting paid $34 million a year. You don't understand.
Jesus.
Yeah, again, we could spend an entire podcast just talking about Blizzard, and it's everything going on with that.
Mhm.
Jeez, what a company.
We are 3 minutes over schedule. So did we want to wrap it up here, or do you have some more you want to?
No, honestly, I think that was it. I think we got the information out there for everybody.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
already, right?
Grimwolfen, right? Already, it didn't feel like an hour and a half passed. But here we are. So yeah, now you guys have a bit of a better understanding of UX and UI design in games. Encore. Join us next Wednesday, Grimwolfen, as always, and we'll get you that encore, buddy. But yeah, now you guys have a better understanding of UI and UX design in games, and I hope you guys have left the stream with that understanding, a bit of a better understanding, and maybe even a more critical eye whenever you're playing a game, to kind of pick out those pieces where you're like, oh, okay, I see why they did that. Because that's something I've been doing that for years now, and it's fun. It's fun because sometimes you can catch certain little idiosyncrasies and little bugs a bit easier, and it's just fun. It's just fun to kind of have that kind of in the back of your head. But yeah, as always, guys, good back and forth chatter. I love when you guys get involved and kind of give your 2 cents. It's very much appreciated. So, with that said, though, that is episode 5, UI and UX design within video games. Thank you guys for coming out again. I'm gonna wish you guys a good night. I'm gonna let these guys wish you guys a good night, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 8:00 EST. And tune in for Friday for the BOR. Same. It's on the Razzmatazz channel. 8:00 as well. But I'll let Greg go into that a bit more.
Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, thanks everyone for coming, and kind of hope you guys enjoyed this kind of, I guess, educational talk on UX design, because it's probably a little more it's a little more technical than some of our previous discussions on, like, say, story or music, but it's a fun one. But yeah, controversial themed games as an episode. Ooh, man, now that
would be a spicy one.
That's not a bad idea, though.
That's not a bad idea.
That could be a
either.
fun one.
That's definitely a spicy one. I will fully admit to that one. It's gonna be a spicy one.
Yeah, we might see that one in the future. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation, and, like, as Rob was saying, Friday nights, same time, we have our BOR stream. It's playing Cyberpunk Red.
Yeah, you can come find out about that story. It gives us a chance to really do some storytelling, which is hopefully what we do best. I don't know. Ideally, what we do. And it is a cyberpunk-based story, and we have I say the what we do best piece jokingly, because I'm the GM of that story, and I got to tell you that my cast, the players, are the really good storytellers. So come and join us and let them weave a tale for you. That would be fantastic this Friday night. If you have not already and you like the content, please do give us a follow. And with that, I think we are going to raid out to a gentleman which I watch somewhat regularly that does a lot of gaming industry content, very similar to what we're doing, maybe with just a little different take, because they talk a lot more about D&D than anything else and tabletop RPGs. Lord Gasumba. All right.
All right, guys.
And we'll raid out to them. You guys have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you Friday,
Yep.
I hope.
Yep. See you guys next time. Thanks for coming. All right. You guys want to head back to Discord?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.